Hello everyone, my name is Paul Third, and this week I want to make a video, hopefully, covering everything that you need to know about mixing on headphones. Because recently, for certain reasons, mainly because Chris Salim made a video and basically shouted me out in the video and said that most of this came from Paul Third, and basically made a video talking about how he's had great experience mixing to Harman in reference my video and the podcast that me and Emre Celik done. Now, with that, obviously the way YouTube works, the algorithm can work in your favour, and due to that, the algorithm started working in my favour, and more people started watching more and more of my headphone related content in regards to mixing. Now, with that has came an abundance of questions that I thought were pretty explanatory and most people knew, but I keep on seeing them repeated, and hopefully with this video, this is going to basically cover all of the bases that I haven't covered before, and you're going to walk away after this video, hopefully with no more questions, and you will be able to start mixing on headphones professionally. And yeah, let's just get straight to it. Number one, room simulations are not for predominantly mixing. They are for translation at the end of the mix. The thing with room simulations is that when you mix critically on them, you've got to think about like what they have to add to get that kind of simulated sound of rooms. They're adding reverb and they're adding in, it could be like convolutions of certain rooms that they've made. Again, there's a lot of phase shifting going on. It's impacting the sound that you're hearing. So if you think about when you're mixing, if you're mixing on speakers, the source is coming directly out of the speakers, right? Obviously, you've got the impact of the room, and the room will interfere with the sound before it reaches your ears, right? You'll get a blend of direct sound and reflected sound. However, there is still, the sound of the speakers relatively, being quite true to the original source. Where obviously with room sims, you're physically adding in different terms of reverb, and again, there's different EQs being added, and that can shape your transients, and in many cases it may add in phase distortions and other things, right? And that's the reason why I tend to use decent earphones at the end of the mix, because I want to ensure that I'm hearing every detail in my headphones first. So what I'll normally do is I'll get the Ananda Nanos, then I'll get the HEs, and now the MX4s, and I'll get the Olos out at the end of the mix, and I'll stick on earphones. And then I won't go through the speaker emulations because I've got speakers fucking in there. I've got too many speakers in the studio now. But I'll do the other checks. I'll do the phone checks, the laptop checks, the club checks, the bar checks, all the different out kind of real world places. I'll do those checks. My advice when it comes to room sims is that what you're looking for is just an average translation. What you're wanting to achieve by using room simulations like Slate VSX and real phones is that the mix that you've done on your speakers, or the mix that you've done on your headphones, it translates in a way that the mix still makes sense. If something's glaringly obvious, where it's like, I cannot listen to this song, this sounds fucking absolutely terrible, then again, check it on other simulations. Check it in other places, and if that's the odd one out, then that's maybe a simulation that you maybe shouldn't use. There's a lot of dangerous things that can happen with room simulations. That's why when it comes to real phones, I only use the ones that I trust, and I've grown to learn them. It's very important with room simulations that you have to learn the rooms, and you have to learn what that room is going to tell you. So in many instances, I'll listen to certain rooms to see how the reverb interplays with a untreated bedroom. There's a really good simulation in real phones that's an untreated kind of bedroom studio with it looks like a small pair of Neumanns. So they're near fields in an untreated kind of bedroom. I like to use that because it allows me to kind of hear how the reverb can kind of fill up a room that's already quite reflective. Because in headphones can be pretty dry. So what you can find is you normally start to add a little bit more verb, maybe a little bit more delay, a little bit more ambience. So they're good at the end of the mix just to go, right, okay, that's too loud, right, bring it down, right? And then you can find an average. But your main mixing decisions, right, your compression decisions, your EQ decisions, all of the critical detail has been made, on your cans without all of that coloration. Isn't that really meant to be the main aim of when you're mixing on speakers? is to have the room treated as good as physically possible. You want your decay time to be, as consistent and as low as possible. You want a relatively dead sounding room, but you want it to sound even, right? That's the main point. You don't want the room to really colour the sound. You don't want it to get in the way of what's coming through directly to your ears via the speakers. So to be clear, my advice is do most of your mixing through a pair of headphones that you really trust that give you all the detail that you require. Mix to Harman, so specifically tune them to Harman. There's a video how you can do that. I'll link it in description. There's a playlist that I've made on YouTube for mixing on headphones. And on top of that, use a crossfeed plugin as well. And that'll give you a good average in regards to your panning, in regards to when you're trying to make stuff translate to speakers, averagely speaking. Wow, point 1 took way longer than I thought. Let's get straight on to point 2. And as we are talking about Harman and crossfeed, this brings me to point number 2, when I get asked this question all the time. So to be clear, Harman EQ and crossfeed goes at the end of the mix, even after your limiter. It's a monitoring chain. It has to go at the end of everything. If you place your Harman EQ and your crossfeed into the limiter, but think especially the EQ, then obviously the Harman EQ is going to impact your limiter, especially in most cases to Harman when you're adding in as much as a fucking 7 to 8 dB boost in the low end. That's obviously going to then fucking massively impact your limiting, and you're going to be pushing into it and fighting against it. So to be clear, crystal clear, Harman EQ and crossfeed goes at the end of the chain. And obviously, just I don't think I should need to say this, but just to be clear, remember to bypass the EQ and your crossfeed when you're exporting, right? I'm very lucky that I've got Studio One Listen Bus where I don't need to worry about it. But if you don't have it and you've got these two or just the Harman EQ on your master, remember to fucking bypass it. Because if you don't bypass it, that curve that is specifically made for your headphones is going to be baked into the master, which means that obviously if your client listens to the mix on their headphones, your mastering engineer listens to it on their speakers or their fucking headphones, is not going to translate whatsoever. Okay, so with that point done, let's talk a little bit more about the Harman EQ, because the Harman EQ is something that I get a lot of questions on, and I still get questions in regards to SonarWorks versus Harman. When it comes to EQing the headphones, do not use a crap ton of bands, right? I think what many people get confused about when it comes to auto EQ is that they need to get their curve identical to Harman, like smooth to Harman. The main aim of EQing your headphones is that you incur the least amount of phase shifts possible. The SonarWorks method doesn't work, right? Especially when you're using, say, zero latency, right? Which is their minimum phase. If you're using minimum phase, then see all of these differences in amplitude corrections that it's doing. Because all the bands are so close together, it's causing a ton of phase distortion, which is basically ruining the kind of imaging of your mix. And it's just going to be hard to basically get a grip of your soundstage, and overall the clarity of the mix is going to be damaged. And that's why when it comes to speaker correction, I advise ARC 4 from IK Multimedia. There's a link in the description, and a big reason why I do that is because it uses lots of wide bands. Okay, it doesn't do lots of aggressive phase shifts, which is what happens when you do lots of narrow notches and peaks. So when we're thinking about mixing to Harman and we're using auto EQ, your main aim is to think very similar to what ARC 4 does when it's trying to calibrate speakers. You're trying to get wide boosts in the least amount of bands possible to get yourself close to Harman. Now in auto EQ, there are various ways that you can do this. You can change the minimum and maximum frequencies, and you can play about with it to get to a point where you can get relatively close to Harman. And actually, what would take some people fucking 10 or 12 bands, you can actually do in 5 bands. You just need a little bit more time with it, and you need to be a little bit more detailed for what you feed into auto EQ. Now, there will be some headphones like the MX4s that do need more than 3 or 4 bands. There are just some headphones that need a little bit more of a nudge. But still, when I'm EQing, the MX4s to Harman, I'm trying to use the least amount of bands as possible. And even if there's a part that I'm like, it's not perfect, but I could like add another 3-4 bands and get it perfect, I just leave it. Then you'll find yourself in a place where your headphones sound a lot better and they sound more natural, and you can make better mixing decisions. And that there is point number 3. But unfortunately, we're still not done with the Harman EQ, because there's still certain things that people get wrong. Now, this brings me to point number 4, right? When you're mixing to Harman, you've got to be aware that in most cases, Harman is going to incur quite a heavy bass boost. The reason why this is important is due to distortion. Now, when it comes to budget headphones, normally the thing that you'll find the most issues in is with the bass response. This is very common in dynamic headphones. Just very common, right? So what you've got to bear in mind is that if your headphones already are quite coloured in the low end, if you then go to add like fucking 7 or 8 dB of a low shelf in the low end, you're just going to be further stressing the headphones and then actually pushing the headphones harder, which is then going to create more distortion. And the more coloured that your low end is, the harder it is going to be for you to actually hear your low end and, effectively mix it. Distortion is very, very important in headphones. And if you need to EQ the headphones in a way that boosts an area that is already distorting quite heavily, that is only going to compound the issue that's already in the headphones. And would you believe it, we're still not done with EQing headphones. And this brings me to point number 5, which everybody, I'd say nearly everybody gets wrong, especially online. And it's this notion that there is such a thing as a studio headphone. It's all fucking bullshit marketing. There is no such thing as a studio headphone. In my personal opinion, headphones are headphones, and there is no such thing as a studio headphone. Because if you actually check the headphones that are classed as studio grade headphones, their frequency response is completely different to Harman. And if we would theoretically, put an EQ for mixing, it would be to Harman, because most records that we've listened to, especially in the past like fucking 50, 60 years, have been done in speakers in a treated room. So theoretically speaking, if a headphone is going to be classed as a studio grade headphone, then it at least should be EQ'd to Harman, or as close to Harman as possible, or a variation of it that's very, 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 very close. But you'll find that a lot of these headphones don't, right? And then even still, I know there's odd headphones, like I think it's Sennheiser's. I think there's the One Bear Dynamic that's quite close to Harman. It's close-ish to Harman. But still, you've got distortion issues. You've got the closed back versus open back thing. I mean, there's various reasons as to why a studio headphone wouldn't actually be the best purpose for mixing. However, I do think I know the reason where all this has came from, and I think this has all came from tracking. Obviously, if we think about back in the days, a studio pair of headphones normally would have been referred to headphones that you track with. So again, if you're in the booth, you'd see a pair of probably Bear Dynamics, or you'd see a pair of Sonys. That's just what you'd see in there. And I think that many people class studio grade headphones as headphones that have very good isolation in them and project the sound in a way that helps the artist that's performing or recording hear their music in a certain way. That's more studio grade, in my opinion, to tracking. But even then, they all fucking sound different, and they all have different, perceptions of transient response, and they all represent the image differently. I would argue that, you could say tracking headphones, that makes more sense to me, headphones for tracking, but studio headphones, that's just marketing hype, especially considering that the headphones that I advise for mixing are classed as audiophile. Like the Harman and Nanos, you would find them in audiophile circles, you would find them in audiophile forums. And many people get surprised when you have people like me and Emra talking about Harman. They're like, why are you talking about audiophile grade fucking headphones? And I'm like, because there's no such thing. They're just headphones. As soon as you EQ them to Harman, what you're left with is what you're left with. And when you EQ to Harman, that's when you really get to the bones of what a headphone actually sounds like. And then you could hear the characteristics and how you could use them to do a certain thing or listen to a certain perspective of the mix. So just to be clear, if you're looking to buy a pair of headphones and you type in studio headphones, or you see them on Thomann, or you see them on fucking Sweetwater or wherever, I can guarantee you that nearly all of them are not going to be suitable, subjective, right? But I wouldn't probably advise them for mixing. They're probably going to mean more tracking than mixing or mastering, which is very important. And that brings me to point number 6. Due to, obviously, this whole studio grade shenanigans that you're going to see online and like distributors classing things as studio grade headphones, you normally find that most people start mixing on dynamic headphones. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is quite a few issues with dynamic drivers, especially in the low end. I have never found a dynamic headphone yet, and I have listened to quite a lot, but I've never listened to a dynamic driver that can give me the clarity and punch and definition in the low end that planars can give you. I always say that one of the biggest reasons that you are struggling to mix on headphones is because you're using dynamic headphones, and especially budget dynamic headphones. The issue is that if you've always listened to like dynamic drivers and you've never listened to a really, really good pair of planars, you actually don't know what you're missing. When it comes to starting your journey, I always advise the Harman Sindaris open backs, not the closed backs. The closed backs I don't think sound very good. I use them for the podcast because they've got decent isolation. But when it comes to mixing, I don't recommend them. But the open backs, me and Emre still actually uses them on occasion. I sold them because I got the Harman and Nanos and the HE1000 SEs. But I was mixing on them for a good year and a half, maybe 2 years. Yeah, maybe it was 2 years. But they were like my first forte into proper headphone mixing. And that was when I was finally able to say, right, I can actually hear now what I was missing on headphones. Before the Harmans, I had a pair of Baird Dynamics, I think they were the DT990s. Can't remember, they were the closed back ones. And I also had a pair of wireless Sonys, which I never should have mixed on. Honestly, what a terrible decision. My mixes were ruined. Honestly, never ever mix on noise cancelling fucking wireless headphones. Just don't do it. Trust me, there's lots of weird shit that goes on, lots of artifacts. I should have never done that. But however, right, I used to go between the Baird Dynamics and the Sonys, and my mixes never translated, and I always wondered why. And then I got to the Harman Sindaris, used Emre's Harman EQ, and all of a sudden I was like, wow, I could hear why my mixes didn't translate. And then all of a sudden my mixes started to translate and I learned Harman. So what I always advise is to start with planars and get a good set of planars, learn mixing on headphones on them, then you can start going to dynamics. Because once you've got planars and you go to dynamics, all of a sudden you'll be like, no, these are not for me. No, these are coloured in the low end. These aren't for me. Then you'll get to the point where you understand what a good pair of dynamics sound like, and then you'll understand the benefits that certain dynamics can give you. I mean, there are some great sounding dynamics for like soundstage. Sennheisers, I think Ed's got the new ones with like the different pads and shit. And yeah, they've got a really, really nice soundstage. It's just that their transient response is really slow, and again, the low end is like, blech. It's just, I find a lot of dynamics just don't have any real fucking definition in the low end, which is why I advise planars. I always find planars to be a great all-rounder. They're not just for fucking audiophiles. They're faster, they're cleaner, and there's a lot of science behind them. If you want to understand more about that, listen to the podcast episode that me and Emre made. Again, there'll be a link in the description. However, it's not just the headphones that you buy. There's other things that go with headphones. Now, I have made videos on this, so this won't be a surprise to many, but for anybody that's new to this, okay, it brings me to point number 7. So point number 7, right, one of the reasons that many people get headphone mixing wrong is because they are using subpar headphone amps, normally via audio interfaces. It is common knowledge, and you can see the measurements and the specs and hear for yourself, that in about 98% of audio interfaces, they come with subpar headphone amps, and that is genuinely due to limitations in budget, right? Again, you think about it, the cost of these things. A standalone headphone amp, like the one that I always recommend, which is the Topping L30 Mark II, it's unbalanced, but genuinely measures better than fucking balanced headphone amps. It's crazy. I use it in the Atmos room, genuinely, because I'm that much of an extra. I'm such a bit of a special bitch that I have the headphone amp connected to one of the stereo outs in Audient Aurea. And I'm that special and that autistic that, yes, things like that make me really happy, where I could just press a button on the iPad and all the audio gets routed to that pair of line outs, which goes to the headphone amp, which I could then put the headphones on and they're EQ'd, and voila. So when it comes to mixing on headphones, you would be amazed at the difference that a good headphone amp can make. Now, I'll leave a link in the description to a specific video, but it's kind of talking a lot about, the reason why there's a lot of bullshit when it comes to audio marketing, especially gear and especially headphone amps. I talked a lot about the Rupert Neve headphone amp. Actually, watch the video I made about the topping E4X4 interface. It's got an E2X2 and an E4X4. It's ridiculously cheap, but topping put like a professional grade headphone amp in that interface. And you would be amazed at just how much a bad headphone amp can colour your sound. And even if a headphone amp has ultra low impedance, so its impedance matching is good, it doesn't necessarily mean to say that it can provide clean linear power or even just enough power to adequately drive the headphones that you're using. And that's really, really important to understand, right? Sensitivity of headphones, because when it comes to consumer grade, you'll find that, a lot of headphones are very sensitive and they won't require that much gain to adequately power them. But when it comes to headphones for mixing, especially a lot of planars, you will need a bit of juice to dial them in, and you need to make sure that when you're cranking the gain, that you're giving it clean gain, because as soon as you add distortion, then you're going to colour your sound, and you're going to have a sound that you can't trust, and then you're going to be mixing into a coloured sound, and you're not hearing everything as it should, because when you're monitoring, you want ultra low distortion, because this is what many people forget, right? Is that when you have more distortion in the system, you actually can't hear distortion as well, because it's distortion on top of distortion. But when you have an ultra clean linear system, you actually hear distortion more. So it's very important that when you are mixing on headphones, you mix on as clean and as powerful a headphone amp as possible. It's not overly expensive. The topping L30 Mark II costs, 160 quid or whatever. It's very easy to do for anybody asking, because again, I'll get questions again. When it comes to the topping L30 Mark II, you have to utilise the line outs of your interface. So what you would use for your monitors, right, you would take, now because the topping L32 is unbalanced, you'd have TS, so 2 TS, right, 2 RCA. So you need a TS to RCA, 2 TS to RCA cables, 2 TS unbalanced goes into your line outs of your interface, and then the 2 RCA goes to the input of the headphone amplifier. Now, it doesn't need to be topping, but for the price, I just don't see why you wouldn't use topping. It's incredibly powerful. It can power, I think, any headphone on the market, even Dan Clark Stealth. Even Dan Clark fucking Stealth. Right, okay, whew, this is way longer than I thought. Jesus, okay. So, we've got 2 left, number 9. Try and wrap this up now. So, number 9, something that many people get wrong, is that they think that when they mix on speakers, they still don't have to reference on monitors. That is something that I got wrong, and for many years I thought, yeah, I can just do headphones and I can just do real phones. That's it. You can, right? You theoretically can do it. However, I do think it is still of some benefit to have some pair of monitoring in your studio, whether it be a Bluetooth speaker, whether it be like a small, pair of fucking, 5-inch two-ways. If you can, get some form of treatment in your room. If you really can't, then again, headphones, you'll be able to get there. Like, there's a lot of times where I do mixes and I don't even reference on the monitors, but I'm doing it more now. And I do think there is a benefit, especially if you've got a setup that you know, right? I've got a setup that I trust. I know when it comes to that Atmos setup through there, I know the Kali as well. I know I can trust them. And again, I know that even the Tantrum Angry boxes that I've got in there, I'm learning them, and they've all got a sound and they all help. I just kind of think if you can, just add in a fucking pair of monitors, right? Do like 90% of your mixing on the headphone system that you trust, but just get some form of monitoring in there just so you can have another representation of the mix. I like to check speakers in my room because I can. I don't see the point in not checking on speakers if you've got speakers. You know what I mean? And I've got like decently treated rooms, especially my Atmos room. It's so unbelievably well treated, measures impeccably well. And even if your room is untreated and stuff like that and the speakers aren't that great, it's still going to give you some form of translation. Because at the end of the day, the mix should still sound good on them, right? That's like what this is all about. Mixing is all about translation. That's the thing that I didn't really understand until a couple of years ago. I thought mixing was making great mixes. What you find is that great mixes is subjective, very subjective. But, you know, the art of a good mixer is getting that vision that they have in the room that they hear. They get that to translate, right? So you can translate the artist's vision to other systems. So I still do advise, if you can, get, you know, some form of treatment in the room, and you'll get a decent pair of speakers and just have them as a reference near the end of the mix, just to give you that extra added part of translation. Especially if you don't want to invest in real phones or Slate VSX. If you just want to do it the headphone way, and you don't want to go down the room simulation route, just get a pair of speakers. Just get something in there, whether it be a Bluetooth speaker or whatever. Just get a pair of fucking speakers in there, eh? Okay, there we go. 9 points, point 10. This one is something that I've mentioned before, but it's something that so many people get wrong. And that is that you do not listen loud enough on headphones, right? You need to understand this clearly, that our ears are adaptable. And if you listen at 80 to 85 dB SPLC weighted, there's a way that you can do it. And let me see, right? So you can get one of these things. Even let's see if I could do it here, right? So here's this in Dara closed, right? So I can't believe I'm fucking doing this. There's even a shot of this, right? What you can do is, it's not exact, but what you can do is, you can take this, right? And put it in between the cups like that, and then play the audio. And all you need to do is genuinely just get it to between 80 to 85 dB SPL. And that's genuinely how I've done it. And it's not completely foolproof, but I found it gets you in the ballpark, right? You would be amazed at how many people listen very quietly, and how many people genuinely believe that listening at 80 to 85 dB SPLC weighted is going to impact your hearing. There are many, many, many studies done, and I'm not going to go completely deep into it because it bores me to tears, but there are studies done, and I'm pretty sure that from what I read, you could do, I think, 15 hours straight, non-stop, without taking a break, at like 82 dB SPLC weighted. You could mix for so long, but that's constant. If you're taking a break, you can mix even longer, but that's something you should be doing anyway. You should be taking breaks every like fucking 20 minutes, half an hour. Something I need to get better at. But I still do, even if it's like an hour into it, I'll take a break. 10, 15 minutes, give your ears a break, get back into it, fresh ears. You need to listen loud to be able to get the most out of your headphones. There's even science behind it. You've got the Fletcher-Munson curve, right? In regards to like the volume that we hear things and the sound pressure level impacts how much of a tilt that we have. So, point 10, just make sure that you're driving your headphones. And normally to drive your headphones adequately and to get the most out of them, especially planars, again, to get that difference that many people won't hear if they listen quieter, transient response, bass response, right? You need to drive them, which normally means listening to your headphones at around 80 to 85 dB SPL. Trust me, I have been mixing to this level for fucking over 2 years daily, and my ears are fine. I had a hearing test. I work at the college. I had a hearing test 6 months ago, and the nice lady said to me that my hearing is very good. She even gave me a little graph, and I don't have like a big dip in anywhere. It's very good. I have average hearing. If you listen quiet, you are not going to get the benefits of your headphones, especially planars. You'd be amazed at when you crank those fucking headphones, especially your Hyphemans and Odysseys, all of a sudden the low end is tighter, and your transients, all of a sudden you get that slam from the headphones that you weren't getting before, and then all of a sudden you're like, shit, how was I missing this? How was I missing this? So listen loud, don't be afraid to listen loud, but don't listen too loud. I think if you go above 90 dB SPL, you are going to hurt your ears. Like I think the time that you can listen for when you get above 85 dB SPL shortens very dramatically. Like, I don't ever advise mixing at like 95 to 100 dB SPL. That's like fucking nightclub volume. And you know what it's like when you come out of a nightclub and your fucking ears are ringing. That's why I don't go to nightclubs now. Probably because I'm 35 and they're shit. But I'm too old. But yeah, fucking hell, I'm waffling again. Right, there you go. There's everything that I think people get wrong about mixing on headphones. This is going to probably be quite heavily edited if I can, because there's no way I'm having an hour video going out. So there'll probably be waffle. There'll probably be some stuff that I've edited out that's probably important. But there you have it. My name is Paul Third. Hopefully you found this informative. If you have found it informative, please, again, check the affiliate links down below. If you want to buy any of the headphones that I use, they'll be in the description. There's a buy me a coffee link, and yeah, you can join Patreon and, you know, get a few extra things and stuff that I'm doing on there. Yeah, there's lots of great stuff. And I'm going to start waffling on. Yes, there we have it. My name is Paul Third, and I'll see you whenever I see you.